Welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep, transformative level. Whether you're joining us live here during Sunday Story Hour in my Facebook group or catching this on your favorite podcast platforms on Mondays, you'll be able to find all the details you need in the show notes or the Facebook comments. Human design helps us to differentiate between what is ours and what is conditioning. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest this week is Stephen Rebolledo. 4-1 emotional generator, Juxtaposition Cross of Ambition. Stephen has been in his design since the beginning with Ra, 1989? He started studying with Ra Uru Hu, the original, right? Isn't that what was?
Well, he had his, he didn't get the information till 87, and the first public lecture was in 92.
Yeah.
I joined in 99.
Oh, I've got a bunch of misinformation in my stuff then. So we're going to have to go in and edit all the stuff that I provided because I don't know. I think I have 1989 in there. So anyway, but it's still a long time.
Nobody joined him in 89. He was still recovering.
I think he was still in denial. So trying to fight against it at that point, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he said it took him 5 years just to recuperate.
Yeah. So anyway, hi, Stephen.
Hello.
Love to recuperate for a minute while you tell us all about what actually happened, how you found human design, and all of that good stuff.
Well, thanks for having me, and hello to your group. And yes, you've been overworking, so please get yourself into a position where you feel empowered properly.
Carrie?
My story. I was living on the island of Martha's Vineyard at the time. And kind of the prequel, in a sense, was I'd met this woman who would only come up on the weekend. She was living in New York, and her family had a house on the vineyard, and she would show up, and we ran into each other at a party a few times. And actually, the first time I ever met her was pretty mystical. It was at a oldest part of the island. It was in the Native American part of the island. It was in a house that was built in the 1700s. And they were having a big party outdoors with, again, it's before social media, of course. And there was a dry lightning storm, and they had multimedia going on screens all over. And it was, it was a really cool spot. So, and it was a very small house. I mean, low roofs. I mean, it's a really old structure. And I don't drink. I don't do other extracurricular stuff. So I just went in to go get a glass of water at this very packed kitchen, and I made my way to the sink. And I like to, when I go to parties, I end up doing dishes. I find it to be very social, because there's always dirty glasses, and glasses are always hard to find. So one of my things, and I enjoy doing dishes. So I was just doing dishes, getting some water. And as I'm going through this very crowded kitchen to get back outside to where my friends were, this woman just said, as I'm walking past, she just goes, "Hey." And I just go, "Hey." And I keep walking, and then I see her following me outside. She ends up joining us, and nothing really happened more than that. And then a couple of weeks later, I ran into her again, and we started talking more, and eventually we started dating. And then I was kind of living part-time at her very nice big family house on the water, real luxury spot. And she says to me, she goes, I met this guy, and he does this thing called human design, and he gave me a reading because she had helped his daughter out, this man's daughter, who needed a place to stay. And so she ended up staying at the same house. And as a thank you to who is now my girlfriend, he gave her a human design reading. And this was Ed Stanton, who was in the very first person basically that met Ra, or Ra met when he first moved to Taos, New Mexico, which was his first stop in the United States. And Ed had the backstory for Ed is Ra was doing a lecture and he was putting up posters with a Rave mandala. And as soon as Ed saw the mandala, he knew that's what he'd been seeking out his whole life, because he studied I Ching and he studied Eastern philosophy and he went around the world and was a merchant marine and an objective observer in Vietnam. And he'd been through Afghanistan, all these, great stories. And but when he saw the mandala, he knew that that was the thing that he'd been seeking. And so as a thank you to my friend, he gave her a reading, and then she immediately badgered me consistently that I need to get this reading. And I was highly, highly resistant, because I wasn't into mystical stuff. I mean, I was into, justice and, all the injustices that I saw that were happening in terms of the way we live as a species, and especially here in this country and so forth. But I wasn't into religion or anything mystical. It never stuck. Nothing ever stuck. I couldn't really process. And I put effort into it, but it just never penetrated. And so after a lot of resistance, and then Ed was there at the house, and we were social and barbecuing and hanging out, and we became friends. And then, I finally agreed, okay, sure, give me a reading. And that happened.
Fine, right? You're like,
yeah. Well, and being an emotional person, I was highly resistant. Right. And as a moody person, as a 3955, and I don't know. And as I learned, as I became wise in human design, that particular channel is often deflects to the no or the negative, just as a way of not having to deal. It's better to avoid it than get into it and then see it's not for you. So I saw that I was pretty correct about resisting for a few months. Now, the funny part is that my friend Libby, she was like the most chill, laid back woman that I kind of knew. And she was never aggressive on any level, except when it came to me and getting this reading. Like, she would not let it go. And, we had a few arguments over that summer until finally in September, I agreed. I think it was September 19th, 1999, that I had my first human design reading. And also remember, back then, internet wasn't really up and running. Of course, there was nowhere a hint of social media, and there wasn't a lot of information available. He was this person, once I got the reading, became my only source for human design for years. And I would order from Gene Keys. I'd have from England. I'd order the CDs and get them mailed to me and so forth, as it progressed in the years following. But the only thing, because all we had was the Rave Ching, and basically your reading was he just read directly out of the Rave Ching, which of course isn't that processable, because it's so cryptic and you don't really know what they're talking about.
Right.
But he gave me my 4 views, basically. And the only thing, as an open G, as an open identity person, the only thing that really stuck with me was well, you don't know who you are and you never will. And that's not your trip. Your trip is here to know everybody else. And I always felt lost. Like I didn't know where to go or how to get there. I mean, I ended up in really good situations in my life. I lived in New York City in an affordable apartment. I spent summers on Martha's Vineyard. I didn't really have a lot of money, but I was able to always kind of pull it off. So I was very lucky in those aspects, but, not because I could just write a check.
Right.
So once Ed gave me this reading, I didn't really get it, but I knew that this was something I had to pursue. There was no question that whatever he said to me landed, in a way that finally I felt penetrated or something that I could understand. And then shortly thereafter, he says, "Well, I'm going out to Taos, where he was oriented. You know, he was on the vineyard for the summer, and his kids were on the vineyard. But he says, look, if you want to come out, you know, Ra's doing a lecture this year in 1999 at the end of the year, and if you want to join me, you can join me." I was like, "Well, I can't afford it." And he goes, "Oh, don't worry, you're with me, and Ra will, like, you know, you can go for free." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Okay." So right after Thanksgiving, we packed up and we flew out to Taos, and I stayed with him in Taos, and then we went to Santa Fe. And the funny thing is, and Ra and I had a good joke about this. Well, after Ed had died, that he goes, "You know, when I first met you, you know, Ed came up to me and said, you know, I got a live one. I got a live one, Ra. He'll pay, because Ed couldn't afford it either." And then when I get there and I said, you know, to, I think it was Sarah, his daughter, it's like, "Well, you know, I was told that I could go for free." He goes, "Oh, no, you have to pay." I was like, "I don't have any money." "Well, you can owe us." So I ended up paying the bill later. But that was the funny joke with between me and Ra about Ed.
Can I back you up for a minute, though? Because you were very resistant to the idea of even like, why I don't want this, I don't need this, you know, lots of no's. And then you finally got it. And so what was it about what you were told that you got your interest then?
Well, in to be perfectly honest, it was a financial, like, I'm not paying this guy to, again, 1999 prices. I'm
Right.
not paying this guy like $250 to
Right.
get this thing. And so over time, we came to an agreement
Right.
where, you know, I felt it was also 5432. I felt it was a fair bargain.
Right.
Felt I was getting a good deal. So then I acquiesced. So really, I mean, if he says, "Hey, I'll just do it for you, no problem," I probably would have done it. But, you know, and of course, it's the challenge in human design for many of us as professionals is, you know, not giving it away, which
Yeah.
I'm totally guilty of. And it's important that, you know, when you receive this information, that you give value. Because if you don't
Yeah.
give value, you don't get value. You know, what do you think you're worth?
Right.
So the insistence and the line we drew and the bargain we made, and then we already became friends. And, you know, I had a lot of connections, and I assisted Ed in many levels, like with accommodations as things went on. So we just had a real agreement.
Yeah.
And
An
we
energy
had,
exchange.
yeah, and we had a long-term social
Right.
interaction. So I got to know him and became more comfortable with him, and, you know, getting the tidbits of information and so forth. So,
And back then, you couldn't just go run your human design chart without a professional to do it for you. Now people
yeah,
can get so much information for free. I do think that sometimes, you know, those of us who've invested a lot of time and money to become professionals in this sometimes have people be like, "Well, I can find it all for free." And I think that that devalues what you actually get when you get somebody who can look at the nuances of it. And I'm wondering if we can, like, that's what I guess I'm wondering. Did Ed have that kind of knowledge where he could look at your chart and beyond what was in the Rave I Ching tell you the wisdom pieces that, you know?
well, he was part of what was called the Vienna 20, and he was in the very first group of people that went to the school for human design with with Ra. So he did his homework, but again, even then, there was no real PHS or psychology. I mean, we didn't go below the line level at
Yeah.
that point. So there was just limited knowledge. I mean, it was already there. If you look at the white book or the black book and stuff, I mean, it's in there, but it wasn't really being taught. I mean, you know, Ross spent his first 18 years of teaching the not self. And it wasn't until 2007 or 2005, where he actually began going below the line. I was part of the he only did one time these three-year courses: psychology, PHS, and cosmology. And I was in that group, which was only about 20 of us. And so we had it, we did 9 semesters on each on each course. And so it was kind of like you watching a television series where you can't binge it. You have to tune in every week to get the next course, the next lecture. So we had a very layered education, which, and Ross said that to us, like, look, you're getting human design in a way that nobody else is receiving it. And you can get, and now, of course, anybody, if they really want to, can find all this information. And, I have like 11 certifications through the IHDS, directly from Ra at the time. And so now, human design is in its, still in its Wild West phase.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a science. So can you really copyright a science to say, you can't have this or that? But, as we know, there's so many people that build themselves as professionals because there's nothing stopping them from saying they are.
Yeah. So what I'm curious is, what was the part that human design told you about you that made you devote so much time and energy and resources to it?
Well, the first time I went to Spain and I ran into Ra in the lobby, and I said to him, so what should I take? What courses should I take? He goes, you're a generator. You want to take everything. Like, okay, I guess that's true. I just found it fascinating. I mean, Ross said, like, I'm your teacher. I'm a 4-1, he's a 5-1. And if you look at our charts together, there's a real connection. And he was the only person that really I felt I could process, like, this information. I could really process it. It made sense. It wasn't couched in mystical language. It was very direct and practical. And so, it gave me the opportunity just to go further. It wasn't like any, like, oh, that's this is the reason why. It's like, it was a feeling that I had no choice. My passion was there. I couldn't get enough of it. I just loved listening to Ra and learning the stuff, and then having the opportunity to look at other people's charts and doing my best to see what I could see in them and just watch how it always resonated with them. I mean, I didn't even know that they were getting what I was sharing, and that, it wasn't really a power trip. I mean, I really did my best to, like, not be like, this is mine and I'm the one that's giving it to you kind of attitude, but just to be fascinated by, wow, I'm just saying sentences and it's just having this effect on people in an immensely positive way that's only enriching them and really being of service, and, all those good connotations. If you're going to, be whatever you're going to do, you do it as a service to humanity and helping other people. I mean, it's always a win-win with human design. If I'm working with one person and they have a partner and the partner's not into it, but we have their chart, I'm like, look, just treat them as themselves. You don't have to educate them. It's actually better if you don't try to teach them. Just, if they're a generator, ask them yes or no questions. They're emotional, give them time. And it's only going to enhance the relationship and be a positive effect on whoever you're with, because we're just really doing, really offering a path of less resistance in the relationship. And don't believe it, test it, prove it, give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not for everybody. There's no guarantees. But it seems like, in my record of the last, 25 years, nobody's ever asked for their money back.
Right.
And I've only gotten, like, the most amazing testimonials, in a sense. I mean, I would do places where I would do 10-minute readings, And people would say like the most incredible things, like you saved my life, or you freed me from slavery, or you saved my marriage, in 10 minutes.
Wow.
Like, just like, how can you beat that as, what you're doing as a profession?
Yeah. So, well, obviously you don't look at the chart and then recite your memorized stuff from the Rave, Ching or whatever. You look at the chart and I'm guessing, do you look at it and see it as a whole living thing to where you speak to the totality?
Well, you try to meet people where they are, depending on their age. If they've already had exposure to human design, if they've had a reading previously. Again, I don't look. I got an open mind. I got an open ajna. I'm open throat. I'm open identity.
Right.
I'm built very low to the ground, very earth oriented in that sense. So what I've discovered is that once I'm in, especially in aura, that I'm just reflecting their identity, their mind, how they're going to express it, or what they need to hear in a way. So it's just like, and I become more and more conscious of, like, the more information you reveal, the more questions are going to arise. And so try to give them what they need when they need it. What's going to be the most effective or the most rewarding for them in their process. And of course, to encourage, that this is, my company is called Genetic Yoga. And I named it that. I heard it in one of Ra's lectures where he says human design is, a genetic yoga practice. So, and I can't find where that was anymore. But, it's the science, it's the practice of your own science, right? The yoga is the practice, genetics is what we offer, but it's a practice. So I encourage people to get their session, go live your life, have your experience, and then come back. Let's go over what has happened. Let's see where it was, where it is. And then let's take you into those areas that, we can further or deepen, or make more sense out of for you. And then go back out and come back and just, it's about your life. So it's not like it's all in one shot, even though that's what I find often happens. People feel like they get so much information in one session that they don't really, maybe they're too overwhelmed, or, they don't feel they need any more, and that they don't repeat. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, I'm just saying, so that's what I encourage.
People, I've had, sometimes the Facebook groups out there on human design, can get, some of them are very different than others. But there was one in particular where the person running the group would always say, like, well, if you had a reading, why didn't they go over this? Why didn't they go over this? Why didn't they tell you? And it's like, how long is a reading supposed to be if you get one reading and they give you every nuance of everything without, like, to me, even just years into it, even if you told me that, I would have gotten so in my head about it, right? So sometimes I think, the idea that a reading is going to give you the totality of your chart, I don't know. I think there's a lot more to a chart than you could possibly cover. I could sit and talk to somebody about their chart for days, right?
Yeah, if you go to traditional forms of psychology and stuff, it's, well, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week. It's your life. So how can you really encapsulate it in an hour or two?
Yeah.
I've had great, I have an Instagram with genetic yoga and stuff, but I don't really feed it a lot. And I don't really do Facebook much, because in the beginning, the questions, well, what does this mean? I'm like, well, yeah, but what does it mean to have an open ego? Well, I can't, what about the rest of the chart? I can't really tell you about your open ego unless I see the rest of what's your makeup, because it has to be part of the whole.
Right.
You can't just take pieces and isolate them. I mean, you can say, in the general education of what it means, but how does it apply to me, or, as they ask it? And I got overwhelmed in the beginning. It was funny because Ra, he was on Facebook, and this is all when Facebook started. And he would say things like, people would post stuff. He goes, well, I don't like that. We need to take that out. And I'm like, well, Facebook doesn't work like that. You can't just remove stuff that other people put up, you know? And I found it just to be tedious and disconnected. I mean, we're in the aura work. It's about when you're in the room with somebody. That's what human design is. It's not about how do I talk to somebody I've never met and don't even know if that's really them, and try to share this type of information with them. So my goals are to be more live centric, which I was able to do when I lived in Hawaii.
And where do you live now?
I live in Manhattan, New York City.
Lots of auras there. It's kind of hard to not be in aura with somebody there.
Yeah. Well,
I will say, I personally feel the connection energetically with someone, even just like on a Zoom or whatever, because, if we think about it, we know, like, time and space are kind of illusionary. So our idea of physical space is kind of questionable now, as far as, the science that shows that, there's like kind of, all the multiverse ideas, so like and I have a completely open head. So completely open ajna. So I just sit there with all these ideas and be like, that's kind of cool. That could be cool. But I do feel that when I am talking to someone on a Zoom, there is a certain amount of connection. Now, it is very much more intense when I'm in person with that person. So I'm not trying to say it's the same, but I do feel that energetic connection. So
yeah, I'm not. And again, back then, you didn't really have Zoom,
right?
So in the beginning, and I do the majority of people that I interact with professionally is by Zoom, especially with the pandemic. But even prior, when I lived in Hawaii, most of my it wasn't. I dealt with the mainland quite a bit. But the effect I had, I lived there for almost 4 years, and for a solid 2 years, I would do group meetings twice a week. And one was a regular group, and then one was an open group. And it was just magical. And it didn't matter if there was, if somebody brought somebody and they never heard human design, and I'd have like 20 or 30 people, and it was just an amazing experience to, have people show up week after week. And with the regular group for, over 100 meetings in a row, just like, how much you uncovered, how much you could discover about yourself and other people. And that it became very apparent that people were I wouldn't say more interested, but really enjoyed hearing other people tell their stories or relate to the chart. Because I think it's easier to see the other person than yourself. You're in it, right? So you're not as, you don't have that objectivity. You're so subjective through your own mind. And
you're saying that the other people, or people like to hear other people relate to their own chart, to the other person's chart, or other people relate, so in other words, I would like to hear you relate to your chart, or are you saying I would like to hear you relate to my chart? Because I kind of
all of it. Like the way I would start a meeting is I had the big screen and I had everybody's chart, and we just went around the room. Everybody, human design is the first universal language.
Yeah.
So my goal is to get you to start speaking your language as soon as possible. So I put up the chart and just read this, read your 4 views. And we just go around the room, and that's how every meeting started. Introduce yourself. And then it just went.
Can you introduce yourself doing what you're saying, you like explaining an example?
I would do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would just say, hi, I'm Stephen Rebolledo. I'm a 4-1 single definition emotional generator. And I might throw in, I'm on the Juxtaposition Cross of Ambition. My variable is PLL, DLL. If I wanted to say what the channels I had, or, whatever details you wanted to add.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
But the requirement was the 4 views, right? 4-1 single definition emotional generator.
Right. Yeah. So I'm a 6-2 triple split emotional projector.
Yes. Yes, you are.
Yes. You have my chart, right?
Yes. And you have a very interesting birthday.
Do you know what it is? I always quiz people, like when they card me
Oh, yeah.
store and they ask me my birthday. And I'm like, and you get extra points if you know what happened on that day. And nobody ever knows unless they're...
As soon as I saw it, I knew it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll let you say it.
Yeah, well, and it was almost at the same time. Close in the time it happened as well.
It was I was born a few hours after President.
Right. I mean, talk about an introduction to...
My daughter tries to say that I am JFK reincarnated. And I'm like, I don't think he turned around that quick.
And you were born in Oak Park?
Oak Park, Illinois, yes.
And he was in Highland Park, where it happened.
Texas, though.
Yeah, but again, Park.
Yeah, this is true. I never thought about that part. But I was always fascinated with JFK. And whenever we had to research a president or a famous person, even in school, I always would write papers and stuff about him. And so I'm always interested in all the conspiracy theories about him and all that stuff. So, yeah. But anyway, but I will say that I feel like when I had my first exposure to human design, it was so different than you because there was so much information available. Not necessarily when I was first exposed, but when I decided to go deep because I was a resistant, I have the same, you and I share the 3955. So I actually was interested for a few days and did my rabbit holing on the internet and then found too many things I thought were too weird. Here I was living this suburban North Georgia lifestyle and reading about crystals of consciousness in the earth and the raves that are coming in 2027 and all this stuff that I was just like, and, found out that, Ra was on, had a mystical experience where a voice talked to him while he was under the influence of, I don't know if that's public knowledge, but I heard he was on ketamine at the time. I don't know if that's true, but.
Well, what he said is that, he was a drug shaman. Which prepared him for the shock that he received because, he said that this information had attempted to get in more than a few times, but people didn't survive it. So he had met people that, had relatives that became catonic, had gone, what's the term? That they were catatonic as a result of something that happened to him right around that same time.
Yeah.
So he never really, as far as I know, said what his, all he said he was coming home from somewhere.
Yeah.
So he didn't really specify if he was on a specific drug at the time.
So my point was, though, I just went really, I was like, this is some crazy cult stuff. And so I didn't really do much with it for the first few years, but it was already hooked. And I kept having situations that would happen where then my higher self would say, well, of course that didn't work. You made that decision really quickly, or you just initiated that, or all these different things would come up. And I had read just enough to know. And I feel like that part of my experiment was pretty pure then because of that. And then I decided, this is real. Let me look into it. I did that whole the internet. And it was 2019. And, then especially in 2020 when we had shut down and I had lots of time on my hands and stuff, I just went so into reading that it became a head thing instead of a body thing. And I think that there's a big tendency for people to think that because the information is all out there, that we just need to learn more, read more, know more. And instead of the whole really living it, because as I was reading this stuff, it started to feel like it was saying, well, here's how you're supposed to do it, instead of here, this is your experiment. What does this feel like to you? Does this feel true? And I got really shut down by it. And I wound up in a place of bitterness that I had not been before finding human design, because I just felt really stifled by it all. Like I felt like I was being shushed, like just go and don't bother people, right? You're a second line. You're supposed to be hermiting, and you're a projector. You don't initiate anything, so don't talk to people until they talk. And it felt really like my 1/8 felt. I was very turtling from it. Like I felt almost shamed by it, right? And so as I don't even know what the exact impetus was, but there was this point where I finally had done enough living and working with it that I realized that I was letting other people's ideas of the chart define who I was, right? And other people's rules for what was okay for this person, this energy type, or this channel, or whatever. Like I was using it as like an instruction manual that somebody else wrote for me to follow, instead of a tool for me to discover my own gifts, right? And so now, I don't need someone else to recognize me, because I've recognized myself. I'm not going to have any attachment to whether or not you recognize me. But that doesn't mean, so I'm not going to follow some rule that says I can't speak to you. I just can't try to get you, or I'm not going to try to get you to do anything with my speaking to you. Does that make sense? And so I've really understood that I'm not going to operate like, somebody thinks that projectors are all going to be the same, or emotional projectors are all going to be the same, or energy projectors are all going to be the same. And we're all different, right? Each one of us. So,
Well, what you and I share is our authority.
Mm-hmm.
And mentally, consciously, I think I'm a projector. It's because my 4037 in my personality nodes is my only conscious definition. I have 3 channels in the root, all electromagnetic, half and half. And I think that's just part of the process. When I first met this information, I shortly thereafter moved back to New York City, worked in show business for quite a while. And yeah, I just didn't want to hear it from anybody. I just thought the world's all not self, and they're not worth dealing with, and we're carrying where the mutation is taking place.
Yeah.
So we're going to have this very deep, affected process, however it is with your triple split projector 6-2 or my 4-1, the core is going to have that essence of I know to just about everything in that sense, until we can, and then I think that protects us so that we can be in our own process, so we can do it from the way we are actually designed to do it within our own deconditioning, which is where for you, right? I mean, so you're still, in a sense, you met in 2019. So
well, I met in 2016, and I had 3 years of just kind of this.
Okay. Well, so you're still,
denial. So
you're still fresh into your your second genetic cycle.
Yeah.
At least. So
yeah, it was 8 years, just a week ago, the 19th, maybe.
Right. So, I take my, September 99 as my start point.
Right.
Because, I hadn't really any exposure. And again, back then there was really nothing to go read about or listen to. But I think that was very correct. Look, once this, human design is a wonderful disease that you get, it's a great virus in a sense. So it doesn't matter what you think. It's going to, it makes its own gravy in that sense. So however your process unfolds, that's the way, we're helpless and incompetent. You're on a planet flying at a super high rate of speed on a spinning axis. What are you in control of, really? All these things that our minds, want to say is this is the reason or that's the reason, but really there's much greater forces at work than any of us could ever perceive as to what's really, really happening. And when I do whatever consulting, I really just want to analyze your words. I'm not going to put any words in your mouth, but you're going to talk through your chart as self or not self. And it's not about like, here's your chart, here are your lines, study them, memorize them. It's like, no, you're already saying this stuff. Let's just see if we can identify where that came from for you so you become more aware. Because that's the only thing, as Ra would say, he had a lot of smart students that were really dumb because they were great at knowing everything, but they didn't live their design. So what's the point? Right? We're into form principle. We're really about honoring your unconscious self so that you really get your life, and then your mind is there to follow. I like to observe people just when they walk, how they're tilted forward. Their mind's in front of their bodies all the time, leading them, as opposed to letting your sternum, your chest, shoulders back, chest out. That's how we're designed to operate, and your mind will go with that, not the other way around. But look, there was a point where Ra said, okay, that's it. We've gone to the bottom. This is as deep as it goes. He goes, now we're just going to come back up and get back to the surface. And then there was the point where he says, look, the mind has completed its work. It's now going to start working against us. I believe I'm paraphrasing potentially, but to that effect. And, that was before social media and everything. And now we're seeing just like the madness and, that grasping of certainty that people hold on to for dear life, denying truth or the obvious. And, we're watching how, we're evolving into the next phase, really. And our minds are so caught up in, using our emotions on a mental level.
Yeah.
And just like that energy of that emotionality and how the mind using it in an authoritative aspect, and just like how, like, literally, we are losing ourselves in that process to such a degree. The madness. And I like to just like snippets of conversation. How many times do people refer to stuff? Oh, that was crazy. Oh, it was insane what happened. I'm like, yeah, you just keep constantly like reinforcing our own madness by referring to whatever happened to you as that was nuts. That was crazy. That was so, ridiculously, all those mental references of our own insanity as a way of expressing, what transpired. I'm like, yeah, is that really who we are in a way? I mean, is that really where we want to be? That this is our reference points?
Well, words have so much power too. And, it is really amazing how liberating it becomes when you start to recognize that your mind is just always making shit up, right? Like every time you have a feeling in your body, your mind tries to make up a story to make sense of it, right? So I find,
exactly.
Oh, I'm feeling something. And all of a sudden I notice the story starts. And then I'm like, calm down. Calm down. We don't know that.
Exactly. Yeah. What was I going to say here? People ask me, well, what's the benefit? I was like, well, I get to watch myself. I get to see what a mess I am. And I can see why I'm a mess, when I feel myself automatically, like even with you and getting this, like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, that's just the 3955 thing, immediately rejecting the notion of doing anything. but my mind, I can watch my mind grab onto that emotionality and try to take it as truth, where I'm going, oh, that's just my mind doing its mind thing with
You don't
my
want to do
truth.
what? I missed
Anything.
that.
Like when you invited me to come on this podcast, that my immediate reaction is rejection
Oh,
to
okay.
everything, not just you, but in general, but it's an internal process. But, I'm watching how my mind can take that energy and manipulate it like it used to. It's just losing its power. It doesn't stop with its genuflecting in its way, because that's just the way I'm programmed, right? I mean, human design is for babies. I had to go, I met this information when I was 38 years old. I had to go, as Ra would say, don't blame me. I've only been doing this for less than half my life.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be perfect at it. I mean, I find it a joke when people want to denigrate me, go, oh, you're a human design person, you shouldn't be like that. I'm like, well, then you obviously don't get what human design is.
Right.
It's not about being perfect. It's about being more aware of why it happened that way.
Yeah.
And again, human design is a war of attrition, I like to say. The more you go against your nature, eventually, if you're lucky, you'll get so exhausted that you'll give up. You can't think, when people say, well, I really need to work on that and I need to figure that out. It's like, yeah, you're setting yourself up for failure when you use those terms, because that's not how it works. Just be more observant, like in general, with open ego people, they often are apologizing. Often, and they leave sorry, I'm not home right now. Like, why are you apologizing for not being home?
Right.
And I'm not, and when I point that out, I'm saying, now just count how many times you apologize. Don't feel bad. See how many times you say, I feel bad because. Why do you feel bad? Because somebody else had this thing happen to them. Why should that make you feel bad? You can have empathy for them and maybe try to guide them so they don't have those situations. But why are you putting that into yourself? Why are you apologizing? So just count them.
Right.
Just make a note as to how, and eventually you go, yeah, why am I apologizing? I can't stop apologizing, but at least I can watch myself question why I'm apologizing now. And then you'll become tired of it. And if you're lucky, you'll, if you step on my toe, yes, apologize. But if you're passing me on the street, you don't have to apologize for that.
Right. Yeah. And then when you point it out, do they apologize for doing it?
Well, what's funny is then as the conversations continue and then it comes up again and I, point at it and then they go, oh my God, I can't believe it. Whenever I do any generator reading, as soon as they make a noise in response, I just repeat the noise. I'm just trying to train their mind to hear I was like, you didn't hear it, I heard it. Now I want to see if you can make it so that when you make that sound, you can remind yourself, oh, there's my sound. Not to measure it, not to say, oh, that's what's for me, just to like, oh, I heard myself. Oh, I heard myself.
Was that hard for you for you to find your sound?
Well, I think as emotional people, it's potentially like whenever I do sacral being, sacral authorities, it's so obvious in many cases when they make noises.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for emotional people, we don't necessarily hear stuff right away, right? I mean, look, my chart says that I am deaf. I have all the gates of deafness. I'm lost. I'm nuts because I have all three mental gates in my head center. Right? I'm the last to know. I got, I'm the Pepsi challenge of human design. So if I can get it even a little bit.
Yeah, you need to explain that. What is the Pepsi? What does that mean?
Well, Coke versus Pepsi, so take the challenge of like, can you identify, which is which? So, with my chart, I have so many hilarious, my joke of being who I am. I'm fixed with my 4-1. So I have these blinders on. I'm deaf. I'm the last to know. I don't know where I'm going. I have an open mind. with all this mental pressure. I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot to contend with, and not to say anybody else has anything differently, but I'm in my experiment. So I got to watch
that. Not get caught in that idea of, because the way you just described it was describing all the lower expressions, the negatives, and obviously there is a flip to all of those. So how did you?
Oh, absolutely.
So tell me those things again and now how you see them.
Well, I see that they're all there, but they're not negatives.
Right. How do you
know that I'm open to going wherever feels correct. If I don't have passion for it, it's not going to work. I'm very confirmed in this human design path with my ambition, right? My chart says I have 31 line 5 in detriment, which is the throat gate of leadership influence. And it says basically that I'm on the Juxtaposition Cross of Ambition, but that line, my only throat gate, has no ambition. My only ambition is to lead myself. And then I discovered in that detriment, that's what human design is. Human design is about leading yourself. So even though I have no external ambition, but that's what I can demonstrate as a fifth line is how to lead yourself. So when I encounter a client or a situation with human design, that's what I'm bringing to them, is a way for them to see the practical, right, fifth line practical nature of just leading yourself, and that you really there isn't an external ambition to that. Because if you can demonstrate that, right, then if your aura is correct, that's what you're spreading. Which is why I like the live. And then again, Zoom is okay and stuff, but there's something about I don't know what you're getting from me when you're in my aura, but I can see that, it gets expressed back to me, right? I'm blind. I have the left eye, gate 11. So, I have all these things that are, make me so internalized, but I'm a force. So I have the friendly nature, which, I always see demonstrated in my life back at me. And I can see if I'm patient, if I'm not reactive, if I remain even Stephen in that sense, that I have a lot more grace in my life, a lot more less resistance as a result. And just enjoying the day, right? My mind is going nuts all the time, but that's just what it does. And I'm not married to it anymore. It's not my North Star, and then when I'm just truly being in response, I like to say that, you're not here to work. You're here as generators. You're not here to work. You're here to release energy. And it's a very different concept because work is drudgery. But if you're full of energy and you need to get it out so you can rest later, then if you're just releasing energy, you're not even thinking. You're just responding, right. And it just flows. And the joy of when it just flows, there's no greater joy than talking human design with somebody or doing a chart, and how much energy I get to expel at readings. I would do, and I can go hours. There was one point where I had 4 clients in a row, once in Hawaii. And by the 4th client, I was really feeling it. And I remember starting to pass out in the middle of the reading.
Oh, no.
And it's being recorded. So I was able to go back and identify the moment that I felt I was actually losing consciousness while this person was in front of me. But I just surreyed through, I was able just to, press on. And then the energy came right back. Because, I'll have I don't know with other generators, but I'll just start to fall out.
Helps.
Right? I'll start to fall out, but I think I've passed out for 10 minutes, but it's only been 5 seconds. And then I have
right.
a re-energized feeling.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's an interesting way. I like the way you put it, that you're not here to work, you're here to expel energy. Well, obviously that can result in something people might consider work. But when you're really operating in alignment with your own energy, you're doing it in a way that doesn't feel like drudgery. It feels like,
well, if you're doing what you love, it's not work.
right. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because we're getting to where running
Oh, yes.
running out of time. We could talk as long as we wanted, but I try to keep these for around an hour. But I have a question that I'm hoping that you can shed some light on that has always been unclear to me, and it's probably in there somewhere. I just haven't researched. But you're a 4-1, which is considered a fixed fate, okay? But a 1-4 profile is not. And I'm sure there's a simple way to explain this, because they're the same lines, but obviously one's in the body and one's not. And I'm sure that has to do with it. But if you can explain, first of all, what it means to be a fixed fate, juxtaposition cross instead of, a left angle or right angle or whatever you'd call it. You'd be a left angle if it wasn't for that, I guess, because whatever.
Right. That's a good question.
Do you have an answer?
Obviously, that the one is a right angle.
Uh-huh.
And of course I'm the bridge, the mystical bridge. I mean, the joke was when, I first heard about this, or not necessarily when I first heard about it, but I did ask Ra, well, it's a fixed fate, my life is here to come up to like a singular moment in that sense. And I was like, did I miss it? I mean, when is that gonna, I don't know what that is. When is it? I mean, I'm well into my Chiron now, and I'm like, is it still coming? Or did it already happen? And it's just something that my mind doesn't understand, that was, wherever I was in my process. But why the 1-4? Well, I think probably, with just thinking off the top of my head here, that they're the investigator, and that's the foundation profile line. So having a 4 underneath obviously is related to their body as opposed to their personality. And so I think that as the 4, as the profile lines progress, and you get to that 4-6, and you're, because it doesn't even make sense. Why would the 4-1 be after the 4-6? Wouldn't it be before the 4-6 in that sense?
The 1 comes after the 6 when the mandala goes around.
Right. So as we get to that point and we get to that shift, then we have completed a process of the right angle. And before we can actually move into, as here we are between 1781 and 2027, we're this interregnum that's going between the right or the left and the right. We're not really, we're all from the past and the future living in the present. So even in that sense, as a species, we're like this juxtaposition species, right? We're Homo sapien in transitus. We haven't been Homo sapien since 1781. And then we're moving into the Rave. So here we are, these transitional beings going from one massive evolutionary shift into the next. And that's, we're providing this bridge as, being alive is, we're the greatest sacrifice of all by, being very uncomfortable, right? You don't have a human design chart, you have a Rave chart. So we're in this Homo sapien form carrying Rave software, right? We're an old hardware system carrying the new software. And you need the new software. You need the new software before you have the new hardware, right? Because if the new hardware came out, the Rave came out, but we didn't have the programming, what would happen to them? So we have to develop the software. So when the new hardware appears, it goes online. So I guess the 4-1 has that kind of same job in terms of our evolution. And I don't know if this makes sense or not, but that's just what's coming out here in the moment.
my open head or open ajna, undefined head, always tends to go into other questions and then try to stay still listening. But right away, the way you're describing that, I was like, oh, that sounds like how Ra describes my variables, because I've got this old-fashioned body with the left variables, right? And then I've got this newfangled operating system, with the right variables on my personality. So he's like, it's like you got this old car with this new electronics in it or something, right? So that feels like relatable in that sense. So yeah, and I guess I can see where the 1-4 doesn't have that transition place in the in between the profiles. So that does make sense now that you are talking about it, and I'm just like kind of visualizing how the profiles change, right? There's certain things there. So but how do you feel? Like I don't know, like I'm a left angle profile, right? So mine is about, interactions with people who I don't even necessarily know that I'll even know that it was impactful, but I impact people's in these transpersonal karma things where, I'm talking to somebody in line at the grocery store and it might change the trajectory of something, right? But I do think that happens for everybody, doesn't it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we're in a fourth line externalizing part of our evolution.
Yeah.
So on the homogenized level, we're all fourth lines.
Right.
Externalizing, right? Trying to just tell you their own stories, so to speak. So, and you being on the leading edge of the mutation with your 6, we're not there yet. So to like actually live out, right, as Rob would say, there aren't, at least that, there aren't any real role models. He doesn't even know what that would really look like because we're not we're in the first line phase. We're not in the 6th line phase. So, we're all a work in progress living out this externalizing part of our evolution, right? I mean, that's what YouTube is, right? Everybody's got a story to tell. So,
yeah,
we're all sharing the homogenized aspect of whatever this means for us as human beings right now.
Yeah. So, if people want to work with you, how do they do that? What are you doing with people now?
I'm available. I have geneticyoga.com. I also have humandesignnow.com, which is where I'm going to try to evolve more as my main connecting point. But yeah, geneticyoga.com. You can get a reading, whatever level, if you have experiences or PHS, psychology, because I do cosmology stuff. I don't know if that's really a reading per se. I do individual, family, partnership, returns, all of that. And often if people, have already have experience in we'll just get a session. We'll just, I'm a generator. I'm here to respond. Let's just we'll just explore what needs to be explored wherever your interests are at the moment. I also have a Patreon site subscription, and I have weekly Tuesday group. I have a nice group that meet, a handful of us every week meet on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
Is that a Zoom thing or an in-person in Manhattan thing?
No, it's a Zoom. It's online. I'm the only one in New York that's in the meeting. So that's the way you can get to me.
Yeah.
And just write me at info@geneticyoga.com. Go to the website.
Yeah.
Leave me, text me at my phone number, whatever it takes.
Okay. So, and you text you your phone number. Do you have your phone number on your website or something? I don't know.
I do.
Oh,
but
wow.
just text me, and just write me and I'll respond.
Right. Okay. And the website is geneticyoga.com.
Geneticyoga.com.
I like to say it loud for people, like clearly for the people who are listening on podcasts and driving, and then it's easy to remember. So every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe of not only your own story, but the story you tell yourselves about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story, I'd love to help guide you through the process of fully embodying who you came here to be. I invite you to check out my website at kathybashanko.com, where you can run your free human design chart, purchase personalized reports, and find all the ways to connect with me directly. And don't forget to please follow Real Human Design Stories on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. And please, if you could give me a 5-star review, that really helps. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank
really
you.
Enjoyed this, and peace out, everybody.
Yes. Good luck.